2, California sea lions live in freshwater or saltwater. If you think they live in freshwater, let me...
And so they actually had to raise Chicago out of the ground. In the mid-1800s, when the population was booming, they actually raised this city up 4 to 14 feet using jack screws over a period of quite a few years. At one point, my favorite story, they actually raised an entire block. And it took a while, and people actually were shopping as this was happening. Some of them were completely unaware that they were slowly being lifted up. Now, that one in particular, the block weighed 35,000 tons. So it's kind of a miracle that this city is even here. They raised Chicago up and they laid new foundation below. When they did this, they also left room for sewage drainage lines. And these sewage pipes, they actually flushed all of the sewage into the river. And as you can imagine, that was also creating a problem. As the population continued to grow, more sewage was created, and that sewage flushed into this river, creating pollution that was just so extreme. And that pollution actually flushed out to Lake Michigan, which was and remains today our drinking water. Delicious. And essentially, people were drinking this water and they were getting very sick. So the city, in another fight against nature, they had to come up with another plan. To fix the sewage problem, the city of Chicago chose to reverse the flow of the Chicago River. In 1892, they started digging these man-made dams, which connected to a man-made canal, and that connected to the Des Plaines River, the Illinois River, and the Mississippi River. And when they busted down those dams in early January 1900, they sent all of Chicago's sewage down to St. Louis instead. Sorry, St. Louis. This river is a lot cleaner today, but you're gonna notice that this color is blue around us. This is pretty much fresh Lake Michigan water entering right behind us at our harbor lock. This river flows in the opposite direction that nature intended. It's kind of wild to know the fight against nature that this city went through. But let's talk about the reason we're all here today, architecture. We're gonna talk about this building on our left-hand side, a tall, wavy blue building, right after we pass under this Lakeshore Drive Bridge. This is the curtain starting our show. Is the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman-led architecture firm. Jeannie Gang of Studio Gang is constantly climbing to new heights. And here she actually designed the third tallest building in Chicago. Now she's known for referencing nature and her work. And here, that wavy shape that you see is actually referencing the frustum, a shape that occurs naturally in crystal, fluorite, and sapphire. But what's cool about this, it's a blue reflective glass. Those glass panels are on a gradient for solar performance, so serving a practical purpose, but they're also serving an aesthetic purpose as well. They're reflecting back the beautiful blues of the sky and Lake Michigan nearby. Now, when an architect fits their building in with the natural surrounding environment, we often call that contextualism, when a building is complementing its surroundings. Empty floors at the 83rd and 84th floor. Those are called blow-through floors. They allow the wind to pass through, reducing wavy balconies. This is Aqua Tower, designed also by Jeannie Gang. Now, when she completed this in 2012, this was the tallest building in the world, designed by a woman-led architecture firm. Then she beat her own record with the St. Regis. The wavy balconies that you see are a reference to limestone outcroppings. So another reference to nature. There are 82 floors in Aqua Tower, and each floor is uniquely shaped due to those wavy balconies. I love Jeannie Gang. I'm so excited. Clock Tower on the right-hand side. If you've ever chewed juicy fruit gum, or if you've ever seen a baseball game at Wrigley Field, you may be familiar with William Wrigley Jr., the founder of Wrigley Chewing Gum. And he was doing really well in the 1920s. he needed a headquarters in Chicago. So he asked architects Graham, Anderson, Probst, and White to design this Spanish Revival style building. Now, we call it Spanish Revival because the clock tower is actually modeled after the Giralda Tower of the Sevilla Cathedral in Spain. And referencing old European styles was actually fairly common in the early 1900s. Now, another cool thing about the Wrigley building is across the street from the Apple store on our right. And you may be wondering, okay, why? Why is that cool? Well, this is where DuSable had his home and trading post. So imagine in the late 1700s, he was designing a 5-bedroom or 5-room home and trading post right about here where the Apple store sits today. There's a terracotta tiles. Light terracotta tiles were used, with the lightest one's tower, second tallest building in Chicago, designed by the world's tallest architect, Adrian Smith. He's about 5'7", but Adrian Smith designed the Burj Khalifa in Dubai, the world's tallest building, at least for now. And here, if you look at these balcony setbacks, these places where the building gets skinnier, this shorter one here actually matches the height of the Wrigley building if you were to take away the clock tower. And that was done very intentionally. Adrian Smith actually designed each of these setbacks to match a historically significant building nearby. The tallest one matches AMA Plaza, which is coming up on our right-hand side. We'll see it in just a second, but I want to hop over to the left so we can talk about the Jewelers building. There's a dome on top of the Jewelers building and then 4 turrets, those skinny towers protruding off of that setback there. Those turrets are called tempietos, and they used to hold the Jewelers building's fire suppression system. If you're familiar with Chicago's past, you know that it's important to have good fire suppression systems in place. And if you don't know, we will talk about Chicago's relationship with fire a little later on. But on our right-hand side, AMA Plaza is coming into view. A giant black box. This style we call black box modernism. And the architect behind AMA Plaza wanted to take over the world with his style, and he definitely took over quite a bit of Chicago. Now, Mies van der Rohe led the Bauhaus for a period of time, and then he moved to Chicago and had a crazy impact on this city. You'll see his style, black box modernism, everywhere. But we'll also see work that was done by his students, including Bertrand Goldberg. He designed the iconic Marina City. Marina City, these circular towers. Now, Bertrand Goldberg hated right angles. You will not see a right angle from him because he's actually quoted saying there are very few right angles towers side by side. And the apartments within Marina City are shaped like pizza slices, an interior decorator's dream. And Marina City came in the 1960s. It wasn't necessarily seen as luxurious or fun to live downtown, but Bertrand Goldberg wanted to change that. Think of any amenity you could possibly want, like restaurant space or a marina where you can dock your boat, valet parking, a theater next door, which is the House of Blues today. A city within a city. And it wasn't that trendy to live downtown Chicago at the time, but things have really changed. We'll get to see kind of the progression of our relationship to living downtown a little later on. But on our left-hand side, triangle up there, that triangle is referencing a Greek, famous in ancient Greek architecture, but 77 West Wacker is covered in reflective glass, which we would see in a contemporary building today. When you combine an old element with something new, that's how you get this style neoclassical, combining the old with the new. 77 West Wacker does it perfectly. But another thing that does it perfectly, our Riverwalk. We're actually seeing the newest section of our Riverwalk. Now, this is called the Arcade. It completes our 1.3 mile long Riverwalk. And this area is my favorite spot, where you see people sitting on our left side. This is the River Theater. They are the audience, and we are the show. So, give them a wave. Oh my gosh, they love us, wow. Very cool. Oh well, You know, if you have time to take a stroll along the Riverwalk later, I have one more tour. Look for Greek columns all the way at the top. Lots of ornamentation. This is an example of classical revival style. This is from 1927. But the right side is an addition that was added in 1986. So the builder's building, the two sections of it, are almost 60 years apart. It's an example of expanding your building, but classical revival in particular, this was a very popular style in the early 1900s. We'll get to see a lot of revival style architecture today, but people were craving something new, something to reflect the roaring 20s, the 19th today. Some leaned more heavily into that innovation and new technology. And you see that reflected here with the geometric shapes on the facade, such as these bronze diamonds, which are surrounded by these zigzags. Those are called chevrons. And then we also have deeply set windows. They act like vertical stripes, perhaps reminding you of pinstripes on a pinstripe suit. Those chevrons might almost remind you of assembly lines in a factory, movement, hope for the future, the roaring 20s. Here, the new Bean building is from 1983. This is where Ferris Bueller's dad worked and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. But the curve that you see on the new Bean building curves with the river, and the blue and green reflective glass reflect back the color of the sky and the river below. This is an example of contextualism. This building is complementing its environment, honoring its surroundings. Now, another cool thing about Wolf Point, even though these buildings are covered in similar looking reflective glass, each building has a very distinct shape. And coming up in front of us, River Point, a perfect example of that. You're going to see an arch at the base, and then an arch all the way at the top. The two arches make River Point look like a hot pocket, and that is very beautiful to me. But this arch is not only distinguishing this building from its neighbors, the arch is structural and acts as a rain gutter for River Point. Now, Wolf Point, this area is surrounded by pieces of history. So another example of combining the old with the new. And amazing pieces of history right in front of us. This bridge here is called the Kinsey Street Railroad Bridge. It's a bascule bridge. Bascule means seesaw in French. And that counterweight that you see behind it, that's one side of the seesaw. And then that single leaf, that bridge there, is the other side of the seesaw. This bridge from 1908 is a historical landmark, no longer in use today. Now across from it is the 8th. It was a cold storage warehouse building. People live here today, haunted by the ghosts of animals from the past. Now, my favorite architect did the renovation in 1981. His name was Harry Weiss. You're gonna love Harry Weiss. Harry Weiss loved nautical themes, so he covered this Fulton House's river-facing facade in nautical stars. This building had to defrost in 1981 because it was an old giant refrigerator. It defrosted for 6 months. It was quite a gamble to design these kind of quirky, postmodern style river cottages next to the river because this river smelled bad. They were working on cleaning up the river. In fact, the Friends of the Chicago River, they were founded in 1979. They've done great work cleaning up this river. In fact, there are over 80 species of fish swimming beneath us right now. Thanks to them, they brought back lots of species of fish. They even tried to have an open water swim this year in the river. The plans were shifted to Lake Michigan instead. So, not clean enough for people to swim in quite yet. They're working on it. But this river actually smells pretty good in most places today, and we see how our relationship has changed. Reflected here, the Kinsey Park Townhomes, a gated community. Throughout our tour today, so I'll point out more of his work later on. You're gonna be obsessed with him. But coming up in front of us, we have a really cool building to look at. 150 North Riverside. Just past this boat, you're gonna see a tall building it actually gets wider as it gets taller. 150 North Riverside almost looks like they took a giant pencil and jammed it into the ground. This was designed by Getch Partners, an architecture firm who they seem to love a challenge. And here, the challenge was the lot, because they did not have a lot of usable space. In fact, 75% of this lot was unusable due to railroad tracks that already existed, but also a requirement from the city of Chicago for a publicly accessible river walk area. Looks like we're just going to be waiting for this massive barge to pass us. But this building will give us some more time to look at 150 North Riverside here. So this building gets wider as it gets taller, sloping gradually outwards towards the 8th floor. And that's accommodating for that Riverwalk requirement, a 30-foot setback required by the city of Chicago. So much sand. Wow. Now, Getch Partners here, they had to dig 160 feet down into the bedrock. They actually installed these caissons, large concrete columns. In this case, they're actually counteracting wind sway with water all the way up at the top of this building. They actually have 12 tanks. They're called inertial slosh dampers, and they hold 160,000 gallons of water. And when this building sways in the wind in one direction, the water sloshes in the opposite direction, preventing this building from essentially swaying too much in the wind or falling over. So thank you, inertial slosh dampers. Now, this requirement for a publicly accessible riverwalk area is relatively new. And coming up, we're going to see another example of that on our left-hand side, the Bank of America building. You can see the logo all the way at the top. This has a publicly accessible riverwalk. And this is a newer building. It costs a lot of money to build this, $800 million to be precise. And if you are a Bank of America cardholder, you helped pay for this building. So thank you, and take it all in. This is your baby right here. Now, this building, in a weird way, kind of looks similar to 150 North Riverside. They also had to accommodate for this requirement from the city for that river walk. And this lot was also shaped kind of strangely. It was shaped like a trapezoid. If that sounds familiar, that's because Getch Partners designed this building as well. They love a challenge. Their work is everywhere. They're very prolific. Gosh, these other architects really need to Getch their heads in the game. But on our right-hand side, 2 North Riverside Plaza was ahead of its time. An Art Deco style building from 1929, designed by Hullbert and Root. This actually has a space building, and this was the first American skyscraper with an open-air plaza as a part of its design. These architects were ahead of their time. The city was not requiring this space, and yet they added it anyway, ahead of their time. Now, speaking of time, what's cool about this section of the south branch of the river is that these buildings are actually laid out in chronological order for the most part. So we're going to progress through architecture history together. We're leaving 1929 when Art Deco was very popular, and we're headed all the way to the 50s and 60s. This is Gateway Center 1. Coming up behind it, this is Gateway Center 2, 2 matching buildings. These are both examples of the style black box modernism. And the rise of modernism came in the 50s and 60s. You may be wondering why there's such a large gap from 1929 all the way to the 50s and 60s, and that's because World War II and the Great Depression meant that we weren't seeing a lot of new office building development. And then when architects got back to the drawing board, the public craved simplicity, practicality, reliability. And after 2 tumultuous events in world history, it makes a lot of sense. Now, these buildings were actually designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, a prominent Chicago architecture firm, but they were inspired by Mies van der Rohe, the architect who created black box modernism, known for exposed building materials like black steel, or in this case, anodized shit. And in fact, black representing what the people needed. Louise Vanderrohe is quoted saying, "Less is more." Now coming up, we kind of saw that trend continue into the 1970s. This is Gateway Center 3, also designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, an example of international style, a style that was popular around the world for quite some time. It was seen as a cousin of modernism due to its clean lines, sleek simplicity. But here, there are not exposed building materials. They've covered those up with a light top material. It's a popular style, especially in Chicago. We have a lot of it. But my favorite style that we also have a lot of in Chicago is contextualism. And Gateway Center 4, this beautiful, tall, curved building is a perfect example of contextualism. This building is meant to mimic the upcoming curve of the Chicago River, and then the dark green reflective glass. Environment, honoring your surroundings. Favorite fact about this building, completed in 1983. We saw the new Bean building earlier, that curvy building on the opposite side of the river. They were built in the same year, and they would fit together almost like two puzzle pieces. Now on our left side, this is 300 South Wacker. This is a map of the Chicago River. In the center is a "You Are Here" dot for this building. Everybody always wonders what it is. This was actually added later. This concrete slab was just blank for years, and then they added this. They hired a New York design firm to paint the map of Chicago onto themselves. Now, things that were featured in Gotham City. This is just one of them. But today, this is actually an office building, renovated in 2019. Companies like Uber, Walgreens, and Pepsi share space in the Old Wayne Post Office today. Now we're continuing down the south branch of the river. We've got some really cool buildings to talk about on our way back up the river. We'll have a great view. But for now, I want to switch gears. Let's get to know Chicago a little bit. Tell some stories from her past. 3 stories. A story of tragedy, followed by a story of triumph, and after that, a story of the future. Our first story, the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. How many of you have heard of this fire? Quite a few of you. We just had the 153rd anniversary on October 8th this year. This fire also started about 3 blocks in that direction. Today, there's actually a fire station where this fire started. Pretty cool. But back in the day, there was an Irish Catholic neighborhood that sat about 3 blocks in that direction. And it was a hot, windy night on October 8th, 1871. A woman named Catherine O'Leary was sleeping peacefully in her bed in this neighborhood when around 9 p.m. she hears her husband scream. The barn is on fire. She runs outside and she sees her barn next door engulfed in flames. And it's spreading fast to these wooden homes nearby. And people are gathering around waiting for the fire department to show up. But what they don't know is miles away at the fire watch tower, the fire watchman has sent the firemen to the wrong location, causing a 45-minute delay in their arrival, and giving this fire all the time it needs to spread. And it's headed towards where we are right now, on the river. You would think that this river would stop the fire in its tracks, right? Well, back in the day, people were not treating this river with respect, and it showed in a thick layer of grease and pollution sitting at the very top of the river. So this fire has fuel, and it's able to actually cross the Chicago River, hopping over to the other side where, waiting patiently across the river, were stores of lumber and grain. Fire's favorite snack. So it continues to spread, and walls of flames reach 100 feet at times. This fire burns for 30 hours. Now, rain finally falls early in the morning on October 10th. When people emerge from the rubble, they look around, and they don't recognize their city. 3.3 square miles of damage. A third of the population lost their homes, and everyone was devastated. Everybody wanted to blame someone for this horrible event, and unfortunately, that blame did fall on Catherine O'Leary. Now you may be wondering why. She was sleeping that night. She didn't do anything. Well, a newspaper article claimed that she was actually awake that night, and this article said that she was awake and she set a lit lantern next to her cow in her barn, and the cow kicked the lantern over and they both started the Great Chicago Fire. The authors of that article went on to admit that they lied in that article, and she was in fact sleeping. She didn't start the fire, but they ruined her life forever. In fact, to this day, you can still buy a t-shirt from a Chicago tourist shop featuring Catherine O'Leary and her cow starting the fire. So I'm here to bear her name. She didn't start that fire, despite what the rumors may tell you. And in a weird way though, this fire actually gave Chicago an opportunity, a fresh start, a blank canvas. And this city had a massive population that only continued to grow. They also had an excellent transportation system, not only with our natural waterways, but our railway system was only continuing to improve. So, this city was able to rebuild. We actually got the first skyscraper, the Home Insurance Building, 10 stories tall. It was torn down in 1932. Kind of a bummer, but and hosted the World's Fair down in Jackson Park. Now, they hired an architect named Daniel Burnham to design 12 beautiful classical revival style buildings for this World's Fair campus. He did a great job, and one of them is still here. The Museum of Science and Industry is the last remaining building in the World's Fair campus. And this World's Fair, despite a few bumps in the road, was a major success. In fact, 27 million people came to Chicago and they saw this beautiful city and put Chicago back on the map. Now, this is a city that has suffered immensely and they've triumphed after this tragedy. They know they need a plan for the future, and they asked Daniel Burnham to create a plan for Chicago, and that's when we get the 1909 Plan of Chicago, which included our Riverwalk. Our beautiful Riverwalk was envisioned over 100 years ago. We also got our lakefront. Our lakefront is protected by Daniel Burnham because he wanted the public to have a relationship to the natural beauty we have here. So out of 29 miles of lakefront, 25 miles are dedicated to public parks. Now we're going to pause real quick. Before we pass this building, even though you'll get stuck in traffic a lot on your visit in Chicago, it could have been a lot worse. Daniel Burnham had a plan to widen the streets. We'll talk about a street that was widened a little later on. And then one more thing that was important to him was riverfront development. So urging architects to design their buildings to face the river. And no one did that quite as well as Bertrand Goldberg. Bertrand Goldberg designed this building here, River City, on our right-hand side. Now this came about 20 years after Marina City. This was 1986, and this took him quite a while, partially because the city kept rejecting his designs. This pink building with the circular shape on top is 311 South Wacker. Some call her the Queen, because she's right next to the King of Chicago, the Sears, or Willis, Tower. The tallest building in Chicago. This was the tallest building in the world for 24 years. I'm going to call it the Sears Tower because that's what we've always called it. But just know that Willis Group paid a lot of money to rent the naming rights, and they're an insurance brokerage. So the Sears Tower stands at 1,451 feet. It's very, very tall, but after they pass under this bridge, if you look all the way up, that's where the roof cuts off, is 1,451 feet. Those antennas don't count towards the height of the building. We'll talk about why that is in a minute. But 1,451 feet is the equivalent of 2,902 Chicago-style hot dogs, the tallest building in the world at the time. And you're going to notice there are different sections of the Sears Tower. They cut off at different heights. Some cut off at the 50th floor, 66th floor, 79th floor, and then only 2 sections actually share that height of 110 floors. This is called bundled tubes. Now, Bruce Graham, the architect, and Fazlur Khan, the structural engineer, they were collaborating on the tallest building that the world had ever seen. And this building needed to be flexible enough to sway in the wind, but they didn't want it to sway too much. And Fazlur Khan is the genius behind bundled tubes. He envisioned 9 individual sections, set at different heights, all bundled together. And when you bundle those shorter sections with the tallest ones, it prevents those tallest sections from swaying too much in the wind. Bundled tubes This is the first application of bundled tubes, the Sears Tower, and then we've seen it used many, many times all over the world. I'll even point out a building later on that uses this system. But the building can still sway a lot. It can sway up to 3 feet in any direction, but on a very windy day, you'll see about 18 inches of sway. Now you can feel it. It is said that if you go to the bathroom and you look at the toilet water, you'll see it sloshing back and forth. A fun way to scare the crap out of yourself. But look up. Another fun way to do that, if you're afraid of heights, is sky deck. There's an observation deck, and then 5 clear glass boxes. There are people in them right now, so give them a wave. Now, is anyone planning on going to sky deck in the future? Awesome. Oh, you already went? Amazing. Has anyone gone to sky deck? Cool. You do? When you look down, this building is conveniently located beneath you. This was a Harry Weiss building, 200 South Wacker. And from above, if you look straight down at sky deck, you'll see there is a triangular setback on 200 South Wacker, forming 2 triangles. Harry Weiss, he was the same guy who designed the river cottages that are shaped like triangles. Triangles are a theme within his work. Always love pointing out his buildings. But remember those antennas that we saw? Those antennas don't count towards the official height of the building. And that might seem strange. In fact, the council on tall buildings, the people who determine how tall your building is, they say that antennas shouldn't count because they're usually not part of the original design for the building itself. And that's true. The Sears Tower opened in 1974, and those antennas that we saw, those were added in 1982. Now, interestingly enough, the tallest antenna is about 280 feet tall. Gateway Center 1 and 2 here, these are 285 feet tall. So just some perspective for you, if you were to stand on the roof of the Sears Tower, this is about the height that you'd be seeing on those antennas. Crazy that it doesn't count towards the height of the building. Now underneath Gateway Center 1, there's an Amtrak train, there's probably a Metro train in there somewhere. These train tracks that we see here, these have actually been here longer than any of these buildings have. And these buildings rent the air rights from the train companies. They've been doing it since the very beginning. In fact, 2 North Riverside Plaza here and the Old Main Post Office, both of these Art Deco style buildings, these were 2 of the first buildings to ever rent the air rights from a train company. Pretty cool. Now over instead, but he had the back of it facing New York City out of sheer spite. It's called Insol's Throne, the river behind the Civic Opera building. Now on our left side, this was designed for Morton Salt Company. Look all the way up, you'll see 6 circular holes made to look like a salt shaker for Morton Salt Company. And the craziest thing about this is that the railroad tracks, they run underneath the southwest section of this building, and the shorter section is actually being suspended from above using a steel truss cantilever system that's attached to this tallest section here. So they're supporting the building from above because this tallest section is actually connected to the bedrock below. So very stable, very secure. It's able to support the shorter section using that steel truss system. Today this is the Boeing building. We just passed the Boeing building, and I've heard Boeing is on their way out. They are now moving. They moved from Seattle to Chicago in 2001. They're now moving from Chicago to Washington, D.C. And I'm wishing Boeing the best of luck on their future travels. But for now, let's travel through Wolf Point for our last time together. Wolf Point connects the south branch of the Chicago River to the main branch and the north branch. And this area actually looks like a peace sign when viewed from above. And that shape inspired Chicago's symbol, the municipal symbol, shaped like a peace sign above. L stands for elevator. But sometimes I think it's loud. This is a contemporary skyscraper trophy case in Chicago. These 3 towers, from left to right, we have Wolf Point West, we have Salesforce Tower in the middle, and we have Wolf Point East on the right. All 3 of these were part of the Wolf Point Master Plan of 2016. If you were to go back 10 years ago, this area was pretty boring to look at. There were some parking lots, just, it didn't really fit in because all this new development started and we had these beautiful contemporary skyscrapers surrounding us. This is the end of the Riverwalk on our right-hand side, a great place to take in the view, and now these folks can, with these 3 buildings, all designed by Kelly Clark and Partners. Salesforce Tower in the middle was completed last year, completing our trophy case of contemporary architecture. Gotta love it. Now, Wolf Point East is a residential building, and if you live here, you get to be neighbors with the Merchandise Mart. The Merchandise Mart, when it opened in 1930, was the world's largest building. It's huge. It spans 2.5 city blocks. The building had its own postal code for a period of time, and inside it has 4.2 million square feet of floor space. That is the equivalent of 28.4 Costco wholesales. Speaking of wholesale, this is Marshall Fields and Company's wholesale warehouse. They spent so much money on this, and then they were greeted with the Great Depression. And they didn't last very long, 15 years. They had this building, and then the Merchandise Mart sold to the Kennedys in 1945 for around half its original value. They had money to spare, and so they added those heads that are facing away from us. Those are, on the left-hand side, we have the Reed Murdoch Center. You're going to see a clock tower in the center. The Reed Murdoch Center opened in 1914. It was doing everything right. In fact, the 1909 plan of Chicago, they were asking architects to design riverfront developments facing the river, right? And so the Reed Murdoch Center did just those, facing the river. This was a grocery warehouse. And then a few years later, in 1926, LaSalle Street had to tear down a section of the building. So after we pass under this bridge, count the bays of windows to the left and right of the clock tower. On the left side, we're going to see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then on the right side, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This building was left asymmetrical by the city of Chicago. Ironically, the Reed Murdoch Center was doing everything right by the 1909 plan standards and ended up suffering as a result of the same plan. Now, we call this style Prairie School style because it combines Prairie style with Chicago's school style. 2 architecture styles in one building. Now, coming up, 55 West Wacker. Look for a golden 55 on the top of this building. This is an example of the architecture style brutalism. Any fans of brutalism on the boat today? Very confident yes. I love that. You either love brutalism or you hate it. It evokes strong themes and close concrete, harsh geometric shapes. These buildings often loom over their surroundings, but 55 West Wacker doesn't. It's pretty short. My friends call it the Danny DeVito building. Now, whether you love brutalism or you hate it, if you go to college, you probably see some brutalism because it's popular in educational and institutional settings. But this was actually supposed to be a style for the people. Brutalism is used to rebuild post-war cities, giving folks affordable housing. And concrete, it's a readily available material that's relatively affordable. But when poured incorrectly, it can crumble rapidly. And so we've seen a lot of these buildings crumble with time. Now, coming up in the distance, a golden tower glistening in the sun, the antithesis of brutalism. This is going to be the Carbide and Carbon building. Now, I mentioned earlier that the Roaring 20s were seen as kind of the time of luxury and perhaps overindulgence. And here, that golden tower is actually real 24-karat gold. It's only 1/5000th of an inch thick, but the Carbide and Carbon dry cell battery company wanted to show off how well they were doing to customers. So they chose real gold for that skinny tower. A lot of people think the Carbide and Carbon as a response to prohibition in a way, because it looks like a strange champagne bottle with gold foil on the top, a dark green facade, and the building was completed in 1929. Prohibition was happening at the very same time. Now over here, on our right-hand side, we got Mather Tower. This skinny skyscraper is only 9 feet wide across at the very top of the dome. And that dome doesn't match the color of the rest of the terracotta. because light terracotta tiles are very fragile, and chunks of terracotta started falling from the dome in 1990. The dome was removed and replaced. Now next to neither tower is the London Guarantee Building, an example of the Beaux-Arts style referencing old Greek elements, but this glass addition is brand new, completed in 2017. At the top of the London House Hotel, there is a rooftop bar. It's one of the best in the world. On TripAdvisor, I think it's the second best. It's beautiful, it's overpriced, but you get a great view. So I do get a great view of the Wrigley Building from up there. Now the Wrigley Building is right at Tribune Tower. Tribune Tower, completed in 1925. A lot of people leave Chicago saying Tribune Tower is their favorite building. And I'll tell you why. There was a reason for this. The Chicago Tribune actually held an international tour. Oh my gosh, you're gonna love this. The Swiss Hotel. A triangular hotel on our right-hand side. Look for the Swiss Hotel logo at the top. And you may be wondering, wait a minute, this girl's been talking about triangles a lot today. And she said her favorite architect, Harry Weiss, was obsessed with triangles. Did he design this building? Yes, yes he did. Harry Weiss designed this massive triangular hotel, the Swiss Hotel. And this is a chain. The Swiss Hotel is popular around the world. But we only have one in America, and our Swiss Hotel is shaped like a giant bar of Toblerone chocolate. Hilarious. Now you can stay here, you'll get a lovely view in this triangular building. You can stay here, but you can stay a lot longer at one of Harry Weiss's other triangular buildings in Chicago, the Metropolitan Correctional Center. The triangular shaped, brutalism style, for my fan of brutalism, prison. And it's about 7 blocks south of here. And you should go check out the MCC just to see it. I know it's weird that I'm telling you to check out a prison, but to urge you to go in that direction, the Rookery, it's one of the oldest skyscrapers, is right around the corner. And the Rookery was redesigned. You won't regret it. Now over here, the St. Regis. I mentioned I was going to set tubes. The St. Regis is our example. This has 3 different sections set at different heights that are bundled together. But Fazlur Khan, his legacy lives on. It's pretty cool. Bundled tubes. Now the middle tower of the St. Regis, there's a penthouse and then a terrace on top. And that's sold for $20.5 million. Although I have been keeping track, and I don't think I've seen the lights on in that building, or in that floor. So this is probably a pied-à-terre, a second home for some very, very lucky person. Now over here on our left-hand side, brand new luxury residential buildings are going to be right here where we see this giant yellow crane, designed by Skidmore, Owings & Merrill, the same architecture firm behind the Gateway Centers and lots of buildings that we saw today. 2 tall buildings, one's 900 feet tall, one's 600 feet tall. Come back in a few years, we'll get to see them. Hopefully they won't be blocking our view of Lake Point Tower. This strange building in the distance looks like a giant fidget spinner, and Lake Point Tower has been here since 1968. Now, you may be wondering, wait a minute, and you're right next to Lake Michigan. Well, they would, if they could, but they can't, because our lakefront is protected. No private skyscrapers are allowed east of Lakeshore Drive. And that was true in the 1960s as well. However, they were rewriting the zoning ordinance that protects our lakefront, and there were some loopholes, including this land here. This is man-made land, not technically real land. Landfill, and some of this is rubble that was actually scraped in from the Great Chicago Fire. So, man-made land, and also, another loophole, there was an already existing parking structure that sat in this lot, so they were able to exploit these loopholes, as developers do, and Lake Point Tower went up in 1968, and today, this is actually the only place in downtown Chicago east of Lakeshore Drive, and you get an unobstructed view of Lake Michigan nearby. Now, the shape of Lake Point Tower, this was carefully designed. It's shaped like a Y to offer the maximum number of unobstructed views, but you can't peek into your neighbor's apartment. This shape inspired the shape of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Now you get to be neighbors with Navy Pier if you live You live here at Lake Point Tower. And Navy Pier opened as Municipal Pier 2. That's what they were calling it. In 1916, they had a for another pier. So they built, due to partly the Great Depression, lots of other things. This was actually used as a military training base for World War I and II. Renamed Navy Pier to honor the Navy. Peek to your left, you'll see that beautiful view of the Chicago skyline. Now's the moment to snap those photos. We're going to be headed back to the dock in just a second. But I hope that some of those puzzle pieces are coming together for you. Beautiful Chicago. It's a miracle that this city is even here today, fighting against nature to get this, lifting the city out of the ground, reversing the flow of the Chicago River. And today, I think Chicago is a beautiful, beautiful place that I call home. Now, we are going to be headed in the direction of our dock. So I do have to ask that take your photos, and please do, but also as we approach the dock, just take your seats, just as we get closer to the dock for safety purposes.